talk about the mechanisms of inflammation so you understand what's going on, which is the first. All right, folks, let's talk about inflammation. Now, this would be the third video in the membership that I think everybody should watch and implement. The first two were releasing emotional trauma, which is the first video I ever released. And then the second one is blood sugar. And now the third one is this, inflammation. What I mean by that is all of these pertain to everybody. So let's talk more about inflammation because it's a word that is thrown around quite a bit, and for good reason, because a few reasons. Everyone has essentially some degree of inflammation going on, and we need inflammation. In the acute stages, inflammation heals us. But when you hear me talking about it's due to inflammation, this, inflammation that, what I'm referencing is prolonged inflammation that breaks us down over time. Now, it mirrors cortisol. If you've watched the adrenal fatigue video, one of the biggest points I say in there is that we've demonized cortisol when really cortisol keeps us alive. It's just when it turns into chronic cortisol levels that are heightened that we start to break down. And that's exactly what we're doing here. We're going to talk about here with inflammation is when it's chronically prolonged, then we break down. So let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. Inflammation is needed. And all of the root causes of inflammation, we've touched on already in the membership videos. So this video is really going to talk about the mechanisms of inflammation so you understand what's going on, and maybe it lands differently for you. A lot of people, said that the blood sugar video was so eye-opening for them, even though I had mentioned that blood sugar is why you can't sleep at night, and blood sugar gives a lot of adrenal issues, and I talk about it in previous videos. But when I broke down blood sugar into its own video, a lot of people had a lot of aha moments, and so maybe this will do that for you. So let's deep dive. What is the function of inflammation? Well, in a nutshell, inflammation is there to destroy toxins and clean up the debris. What I mean by debris is that when the immune system is going after toxins, it's like a war. And your immune cells actually will engulf toxins, and sometimes they'll essentially commit suicide. They will explode to kill the toxin, but that leaves debris, and your immune system also has to clean that up afterwards. So that is a big clinical pearl of what we're going to be talking about with inflammation. So acute inflammation is very localized, right? You got redness, heat, swelling like a sprained ankle. Chronic inflammation is systemic. It is all over the body. And when we get from acute to chronic, some of the differences is, as I just said, the acute is the redness, the swelling, it could be itchy, could have pain. Like a sprained ankle is the perfect example. With chronic inflammation, you'll get pain and fatigue, but write this down. The number one thing you'll get is loss of function. So I cover this quite a bit in the pain and fatigue video because it all comes down to mitochondria, but we're going to I want to break down inflammation even further in this video. So chronic inflammation, if it's in the gut, you're going to get things like bloating or constipation. That's loss of function, right? If it's in the skin, it's redness and swelling. If it's in the brain, it's memory issues, it's depression, it's brain fog is a huge one. So you're getting loss of function. If it's in the joint and the muscles, you're going to get stiffness and achiness. And if it's in the bone, you're going to get osteoporosis and osteopenia. Now, I have to mention Versandol. If you guys have heard me talk about Versandol, the biggest influence on me from learning frequency functional medicine came from Dr. Versandol. And I can still see him in a blue sport jacket screaming from the stage about osteoporosis, osteopenia, and bone inflammation. And what he said was, everyone wants to throw minerals and calcium at it. And he goes, I did this for years until I found out that the minerals were being burned in the fire that you have to put out for the body. And he used a lot of metaphors and things like that. And so fire is inflammation. And so what happens is if there's inflammatory processes going on, it breaks down your bone cells, and then you show up for low minerals. And when you are putting in calcium and vitamin D and K and boron and silica, things like that, it is a good idea in some instances, but if you're not putting out the fire, the inflammation that got you there in the first place, it's not a great protocol. Okay. One of the things that I've seen when people are inflamed is the saying of, I'm just getting old, right? How many times people say that's just my old age? No, that's inflammation causing that, and you're attributing it to old age, because there is some truth to that. But there's people who have none of that well into their 70s, still skiing and things like that. What's the difference, right? Okay, and then clinical pearl. Chronic prolonged inflammation is an immune system dysregulation state. Okay. Number 2, inflammation is completely overlooked in Western medicine because it is multifactorial. There is not one cause for everybody. And so whenever there's something that has multiple causes, Western medicine is lost. And so what they'll say is, well, just increase your vegetables, increase your fruit, stop eating red meat, lay off the butter, lay off the salt. Look what that has done to us, right? It's made us worse. And however, they really strive in acute inflammation, right? They have steroids, things like that, that can get you out of an acute inflammatory response relatively quickly, but it's not sustainable, right? I always say that a lot of chronic health issues is the wrong treatment to acute situations. That's a clinical pearl, folks. Now let's get into the mechanism of what's happening. Some of the most common reasons why it goes wrong, right? Why it turns acute into chronic inflammation, and then some lifestyle and supplements and things that we can do to combat it. All right. So there's 4 main steps in inflammation in general. There's activation of immune cells. So that means that there's these macrophages, there's dendritic cells, there's neutrophils. Again, I'm going to throw these words out at you. You should know what they are, but you don't have to know what they are. It just depends on how much you want to know. So the macrophages, the dendritic cells, they're what we call antigen presenting cells. Antigen is basically the toxins, the food, the infections, the metal, the chemical. And what these cells do is sample the toxin and then provide it, expose it to your immune system. So you have activation of immune cells is number 1. Number 2, when those antigen presenting cells present the antigen, then your immune system has recruitment of more immune cells. This is where you get your T cells. You hear me talking about T helper 1 or Th1, Th2 cells. You got B cells. This is where you have mast cells. This is where histamine comes in. Then from there, you have amplification of the inflammatory response. And this is the part that is healing you, right? But creating debris fields and things like that. And this is regulated through NF-kappa B. Talk about it a lot in the autoimmune video. And then the last thing is resolution. And this is a huge portion of this video because resolution stops the inflammatory response. And too many times people don't have proper resolution. We'll get into all of this. So we have activation of immune cells, which then lead to recruitment of immune cells. We have amplification of the inflammatory response, and then we have the resolution. That is inflammation 101. That is everything in a nutshell, bird's eye view. So basically, here's an example of it going correctly. So you have the antigen, touches the antigen presenting cell. There's the activation. It recruits T cells. So you have these T helper cells, 1 and 2, which are T helper 1 is T cells, T helper 2 is B cells. Okay. And then that provides, that's recruitment, and that provides amplification. Then you have T suppressor cells, which shuts down the recruitment essentially. And that is where resolution starts happening, and it shuts down the amplification. That turns down the T helper cells. Well, what regulates T suppressor cells and T helper cells in overall? T regulatory cells, which I have harped on so much in videos this year. I've talked about in the autoimmune video. I talked about it in so many of the videos. And so T regulatory cells are absolutely crucial and the number 1 thing for resolution. Now, let's see what goes wrong. Here's the bird's eye view of what goes wrong in this process. So what creates chronic inflammation? Recurring activation. So that's step 1, right? We have infections, which release lipopolysaccharides. I'm going to be plugging a lot of my already done videos because a lot of the root causes, like I said, have already been done. But now I'm going to go into, a bird's eye view of inflammation. And then if I've already done the videos, I will plug them. So right here, infections, lipopolysaccharides. I talk about it a ton in the leaky gut video. Lipopolysaccharides is an endotoxin that is, a lot of people say, the most potent immune activator on the planet. I tend to agree. And what that does, I don't want to throw too many words out, but you can watch this video as many times as you want and create notes. What those do is create what we call PAMPs, PAMPs, pathogen-associated molecular patterns. That's what gets the immune system revved up. Okay, so we have infections that will cause recurring activation. We have environmental chemicals, especially pesticides and heavy metals, that create recurring activation. Dietary proteins. If you are eating foods that you are sensitive to or are just inflammatory, then you will have chronic reactivation. We have injuries. Now, this is like physical injuries, traumatic brain injuries, or things that, like a torn rotator cuff or meniscus injury or a sprained ankle that isn't resolved. If we don't resolve those basically release something or create something called DAMPs now, damage associated molecular patterns that keeps reactivating the immune system. If you have ever been treated by me, the first thing that I do on every patient, every visit is clear what we call adaptations. And they are a lot of times stored in the fascia. So what I'm doing is clearing the DAMPs, is chronic old injuries. It is profound. So when you hear me talk about adaptations, if you're a patient, you understand because I just beat this into the ground. I clear those first before anything. Advanced glycation end products. I talked about that in the blood sugar video, right? When we have hyperglycemia and these inflammatory glycation end products, that is a huge immune activation stimulator. So these diabetics, pre-diabetic, hyperinsulinemia will have this that is a current reactivation. Next, I wrote down emotional stress. Our emotional stress may be with infections number one. Honestly, the people with the chronic emotional mental stress is a chronic ramp up of stress hormone, and stress hormone completely is a chronic reactivator and a massive amplifier of NF-kappa B. And then from there, the last one I wrote down was just allergies. If you have environmental allergies, food allergies, the immunoglobulins, IgE, IgM, IgG, those ramp up NF-kappa B. They amplify significantly. And so a lot of people ask the difference between IgE, M, and G and A. IgE is like a Puron allergy. So a lot of times you'll have this to foods and airborne things like molds. IgG and IgM are a little different. They're more the sensitivities. They're not as severe as an IgE. So IgM is basically your first immunoglobulin that raises. So if your IgM is high to an infection, it's a current infection. After that, as that's scaling down, then IgG raises. And IgG is basically telling you that there was a past infection, or if you know what your IgG levels were and now they're higher, it is a current reactivation of something like Epstein-Barr virus, a lot of virus patterns. So if your IgG is elevated, that means it's a reactivation. And then IgA lives in your mucosa. It's in your gut lining. It's in all of your mucous membrane. So that can lower, that can higher. A lot of times IgA, especially secretory IgA, hires with too much mental stress and mold exposure. Okay, so all of that is recurring activation, which leads to recurring recruitment of T cells and B cells. From there, you have ongoing amplification. That is NF-kappa B, which NF-kappa B, write this down, means systemic inflammation. What else gets amplified by NF-kappa B? Inflammatory cytokines, inflammatory prostaglandins, histamine, INOS, which is the bad nitric oxide that can really inflame nervous tissue and blood vessels. And that will also, NF-kappa B will increase adipokines, which I talked about in the blood sugar video as well, which is the toxic hormones that your fat cells secrete. And then all this leads to impaired resolution. And impaired resolution, here's a clinical pearl. How long does it take you to heal? If you're a person who gets scarred easily and can't recover from an infection, still have a cough, have a sprained ankle, it takes forever to heal, a broken bone, forever to heal. That's because your resolution is not great. We have to figure out what is causing that and how we can promote better resolution. So all of those go together, but it can be in any level that you have your biggest issue. Is it recurring activation? Is it ongoing amplification? Or is it impaired resolution? Or is it a combination of all of them? Now, with impaired resolution comes debris fields. I talked about this originally when I said, what's the use of inflammation? What is inflammation in a nutshell, right? Destroy toxins, get rid of debris. So debris fields are those DAMPs, damage-associated molecular patterns. And some of the most common reasons why they stick around is one is your prostaglandins are off. So that's your essential fatty acids. That's number one. Impaired HPA axis, which is adrenal fatigue. That's the adrenal fatigue video. Low antioxidant and low vitamin D status. I talk about that a lot in the pain and fatigue video. The antioxidant status is crucial. That is covered at nauseum in the pain and fatigue video. And then the last one, so it's prostaglandins, impaired HPA axis, low antioxidants, low vitamin D, and then low myokines, which is the good anti-inflammatory immune chemicals that are released when we, what's a myo? Muscle, when we move muscles, when we exercise. And the one thing that, I wrote this down, that leads to all of that, the recurring activation, the recruitment, the ongoing amplification, the impaired resolution, is a weakened immune system. Now, I know that I talk about this a ton, but the weakened immune system will absolutely come from environmental toxicity, but it is not the only thing that we have to address, because even aging weakens your immune system. So this video will cover the environmental toxins, but just as much, we're going to talk about how to strengthen your immune system. In Chinese medicine, they call it strengthening your constitution. And we're going to talk about that a ton in this video. Clinical Pearl, write this down. Endogenous inflammation, which means internal inflammation, determines the severity and duration of inflammation that is caused when reacting to exogenous triggers, which is environmental. So I'm going to explain that a little bit. So endogenous inflammation means our internal environment. Exogenous means it's coming from the environment. So let's say two people. Say one person has really stable blood sugar, and the other person has very unstable blood sugar, and they have a ton of advanced glycation end products in their system. So that creates this endogenous inflammation. If they're exposed to COVID or a virus, the person that has the advanced glycation end products is going to have a longer and more severe inflammatory reaction to COVID and that virus compared to someone who doesn't have those advanced glycation end products, who has less endogenous inflammation. I hope that makes sense. So the people who do the worst with environmental toxicity are the ones who have the most amount of endogenous inflammation. And I'm going to get into what the most common endogenous inflammatory patterns are. We're going to talk about it right now. So number one, as we age, we need to take care of our barriers and our tolerance. You have to know that barriers and tolerance are so much. And as we age, you've heard me say this, there are three chemicals that are so crucial to us that lower as we age: glutathione, stomach acid, and nitric oxide. And so all those do barriers. Glutathione is the master antioxidant that takes care of our barriers. Hydrochloric acid, which is our stomach acid, is the main chemical in our stomach that helps us digest proteins and kill infections. And nitric oxide is the main antioxidant that protects our blood vessels. So that is, those are crucial. Now, that is barriers. Tolerance is basically how immune reactive you are. So for instance, if you are exposed to pesticide, some people can't handle that and their immune system goes haywire. Other people do better with it because they have better tolerance. Now, there are two types of tolerances. There's central and peripheral. Central is thymus gland regulated, And peripheral is our mucosa. So again, back to our gut barrier, our sinus barrier, our lung barrier, our blood-brain barrier, things like that. So basically, in a nutshell, I'll talk about how to support these, but for barrier systems and for tolerance, you want to support, as we age, our thymus gland and T regulatory support. All right. So what other endogenous factors? Blood sugar. Absolutely. Blood sugar dysregulation creates those advanced glycation end products, which is inflammation, or creates inflammation. It has stress hormone release. It has insulin release. You guys know from the blood sugar video how important it is. Next is adipokines. I already talked about this. The toxic hormones that is released from toxic fat cells. Then hormone levels. How's your testosterone, your estrogen, and progesterone? We have the hormone videos for that. If your hormones are too high, generally it is going to be stress and the inability to clear. So your liver, gallbladder, gut. If they are too low, that means that they've been beaten down for so long that your mitochondria need help. So I talk about this in a lot of my videos, in the hormone video, talk about it in the adrenal fatigue video, in the pain and fatigue video. The hormone cortisol is such a big deal when it comes to your estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone, along with insulin, right? Cortisol over time breaks down your barriers and leads to insulin resistance. So that's a huge deal. If you have low cortisol, now you're going to have low blood sugar. Well, what happens when you have low blood sugar? Your body tries to release adrenaline to raise your blood sugar. That adrenaline is a massive inducer of NF-kappa B amplification. So hormone levels, HPA axis dysregulation, which we just covered with cortisol. Gut dysbiosis, how bad is your leaky gut? How much endotoxemia do you have, those lipopolysaccharides? That significantly increases the amplification of NF-kappa B. How's your liver? Is it impaired? Impaired liver detoxification depletes your antioxidant and increases your NF-kappa B. How is your prostaglandin imbalance? Your essential fatty acids? Do you eat fried foods? Things like that. Do you take good essential fats like fish oil? And then stress. Mental stress is amplifies everything. So barriers and tolerance, blood sugar, how much fat you have on you, your HPA axis and cortisol, hormone dysregulation, gut dysbiosis, impaired liver, prostaglandin balance, and stress. Those are the main endogenous factors. Then we have the exogenous from the environment. Toxins increase your free radicals, which create more DAMPs, right? Damage-associated molecular patterns. That increases NF-kappa B. So what's the most common exogenous? Infections. Parasites, there's parasite video. Fungus, mold, yeast video. I changed the mold video to mycotoxin, fungal, yeast because it's all the same. You got to treat it all the same. Bacteria. H. pylori is a huge one. I talk about it in multiple videos, but I really talk about it in leaky gut, gallbladder, and especially GERD acid reflux video. That will talk a lot about H. pylori. And then viral, cytomegalo, Epstein-Barr, roseola, COVID, all of that. If you don't have a frequency medicine practitioner, two things. I have the Array 12, which is in the Rupa link, which will scan for pathogens. And I have the symptom quiz, which can guide you. Foods after infections. For that, Array 10 is a great one that I have done it myself. It does 180 foods in raw, cooked, steam, all the different forms, and it will test all of that. Food sensitivity, so IgG versus IgM, and then IgE, which is more food allergies. That increases NF-kappa B. Foods will have cross-reactivity. Make sure you don't have autoimmune issues because the molecular patterns of foods can cross-react to similar amino acid sequences of our organs. So if you have an autoimmune issue, the best blood test I recommend is the Array 5, which is in the Rupa link in the membership store. That will do all the different tissues to see if there's any autoimmune reaction beyond just the main one you know of. So back to foods, GMOs, genetically modified foods will create an inflammatory response. Food colorings, food colorings will change the protein sequence of foods and make them more immunoreactive, right? They will override your tolerance. After foods, chemicals, pesticides, air pollutants. Make sure that you control your home at least. I have an air doctor right behind the camera. I have it in my treatment room. I have it in every room of my house. It will bind up dust. It will bind up mold spores. If you have known mold and you have mycotoxins, you need to get remediated and use things like superstratum cleaning products. Some air filters will say they'll do mycotoxins. I'm telling you, I would never rely on an air filter alone to do mycotoxins. I would get that cleaned out professionally. Heavy metals. A lot of people ask me about what's your heavy metal protocol. So heavy metals that come from the environment and vaccines, here's my protocol. Cleanse Plus, Circutonic are the two I use from Vervita, Shisandra and Takasumi from Supreme. I will combine those. If you want one more after that, GlyphoX. But if I had to choose, Cleanse Plus, Circutonic, Shisandra, Takasumi. Okay, another one, lifestyle. Are you sedentary? Are you stressed? Stress hormone, right, increases pro-inflammatory cytokines, amplifies NF-kappa B. Do you not sleep? All of that stuff increases NF-kappa B. Do you have no hobbies? This is a big one. Like, a lot of people know I'm obsessed with cars. I've been obsessed with cars since I was 6 years old. And on my free time, when I'm not working with the family, my recharge time is car events, meeting up with my friends, going on drives in country roads, doing rallies, doing, charity events for cars. That's how I recharge. That is my hobby. That helps me de-stress, right? The next one, this is a big one. The more I'm in practice, the more I find that people who have the most inflammation and can't resolve their issues are the people who don't believe in a higher power. Now, you can believe in God and Jesus Christ. You can believe in the universe. You need to subscribe to something higher than yourself. Because what happens is when you don't have something that you look up to, you blame everything. You blame your problems on other people. But when you do have a higher power, you have trust. And that brings peace. And that helps regulate your stress hormones. And the saying that I love is that when you believe in that higher power, like God, you have a peace that passes all understanding. And until you've experienced that, it's so hard to describe. And so I invite you to explore that if that resonates with you, if that's you essentially. So now in general, I'm going to go pro-inflammatory life versus anti-inflammatory life. Pro-inflammatory life, no sleep, no movement. You don't sleep well, you don't get to sleep on time. Remember, all your deep sleep happens before midnight, so you should be asleep by 10 p.m. You don't exercise. You're stressed. You eat a bad diet with food sensitivities. You have a ton of infections and dysbiosis. You are not clearing the chemicals because your gut and liver are so toxic. You're not clearing the environmental chemicals. That leads to a ton of barrier issues. So you don't do well around smells, right? You can have asthma. You have dysregulated cortisol due to all of these toxins. And then you have a prostaglandin imbalance. You're eating fatty fried foods. You're not getting good oils in your diet. Now you have the anti-inflammatory. Exercise, sleep, good diet, ton of antioxidants from supplements and good vegetables and fruits. You have a great microbiome. And you have a prostaglandin balance. You do good fatty fish. You can do lean oil for MCT oil. Lean oil is in the membership store. You do fish oil supplements. I'll talk about some of my favorites here in the next section. That leads to prostaglandin balance, and that really balances your inflammation. So how do we test? Acute inflammation is easy. The two I would look at, really the three, is CRP, ferritin, and sed rate or ESR. CRP should be less than 1. Ferritin, I've always was taught should be 30 to 80. Some functional med people say 50 to 150. I think around 50 to 90 or 100 is become my new, that's where I want to see it. So I would say 50 to 100 or 50 to 90 is a really good place to be with ferritin. And then SED rate should be less than 10. However, those are acute phase reactants. They will hire in the presence of acute inflammation. CRP hires in the presence of infections and too much body fat. So they do not tell you how chronically inflamed you really are. And the thing about chronic inflammation is there's not one good marker to screen for. It is a combination of patterns with multiple blood tests. There's people who read it much better than I. I go off of frequency medicine. I think blood tests are a great question to ask, but I am not an expert in reading everyone's blood work. I definitely am much better at frequency medicine. So what I will do is I will take an NF-kappa B vial and I will muscle test that on them. And if they react poorly to it, I'll find how high or how amplified the NF-kappa B is. Then I will use other vials and hand modes to see what is causing it. And that is where I gain my knowledge and information and put it into these videos of what has helped most people. Okay, but one of the tests that I would say is Cyrex Array 14, which is in the Rupa link, is a saliva sample that goes over how reactive your immune system is. It's a really good bang for your buck test. It does your blood-brain barrier, your gut barrier. Is there plastics in you? Is there the main heavy metals, the main infections? It's kind of a general test to see, is there black mold? It just seeing how reactive your immune system is to these toxins. So that's like the biggest bang for your buck, and it's a saliva sample. Very easy to do. All right, next. What a person complains about is also a good indication of where their inflammation resides. So I'd made a big list. So if someone comes in, they have increased body fat, they have adipokine inflammation. If they have low muscle mass, they have decreased myokines, which can create inflammation. If they have fatigue after meals, they have hyperinsulinemia, which promotes inflammation. If you have low libido, if you're a female and have PMS and cycle issues, you have hormone associated inflammation. Is your diet lack good fats like olive oil? Does it have a lot of fried foods? Here's 2 clinical pearls for prostaglandin balance. Do NSAIDs help you? If they do, your prostaglandins are imbalanced. And do you get period cramps? If you do, yes, can be estrogen dominance, but you already know your prostaglandins are imbalanced. So that if you eat fried foods, NSAIDs help you. If you're a female, have period cramps, prostaglandins. Abnormal sleep patterns and energy throughout the day. You have a dysregulated HPA axis, adrenals, all that, associated inflammation. Do you have bloating and constipation? Now you have dysbiosis associated inflammation. Do you react to foods? Now you have leaky gut and loss of tolerance associated inflammation. Do you react to air quality, poor air quality? Now you have low antioxidant status, which it has a decreased lung barrier health inflammation. Do you have swelling and fluid retention with exogenous chemicals and hormone fluctuations? Now you have a congested liver associated inflammation. You can't recover from exercise. You have a depleted antioxidant status. Sensitivity to chemicals, again, depleted antioxidant status. Chronic sinusitis and tonsillitis. Now you have biofilms and infections associated inflammation. Loss of resilience with age. You have low glutathione, your antioxidants are decreasing. And they call it immune senescence, promotion of inflammation. So as we age, right, we lose glutathione, thymus function, stomach acid, nitric oxide. They call it inflammaging. That's the people who are like, yeah, since I got older, I have aches and pains. That's what's going on. All right, so what do we do about it? Okay, we strengthen our immune system resilience, okay, by supporting our barriers and tolerance while finding what our main exogenous triggers are. Folks, if you haven't, please take the symptom quiz in the membership. What I did was created a quiz that will guide you to root cause videos, depending on your answers and the algorithm it has created. That might not be as obvious. So for instance, if you join the membership, you're like, hey, I came for infertility. You might want to start with the infertility video. Hey, I came because I have high blood pressure, cholesterol, heart disease. Watch the cardiovascular video. Hey, I came because I have autoimmune. Watch the autoimmune video, right? Those are pretty obvious. But Lyme, parasites, viruses, mold, EMF, methylation, those aren't so obvious oftentimes. And a lot of times you feel like you have all of them. That's what this quiz was made for, is to guide you in those videos that might not be as obvious. So use that to find your exogenous triggers. All right, number one, how do we strengthen us? Balance your blood sugar and sleep. Absolutely crucial. Those two, absolutely. Blood sugar is in the blood sugar video. If you can't sleep, because in sleep is how we heal, it's how our immune system regulates and primes, watch the insomnia video. Number three, exercise. Even isometric movement, which means that you're doing movement that contracts muscles without angle changes of the joint. So like, for instance, core strength would be like planks. You're not moving, but your muscles are contracting. Those are all that are needed to really create myokines. Make your body adapt. Your body needs to be put through stress to strengthen. So cryotherapy and infrared sauna, right? They do cold and heat shock proteins respectively. That repairs your DNA. You can do cold plunges, cold shower, and then infrared saunas. Red infrared light. If you don't have a fringe red infrared light of any type, get one. Red light, infrared light increases your mitochondrial health and increases your antioxidants, which further helps your barriers and your mitochondria. Diet. A lot of people ask me, what's the best diet? If I had to just blindly choose for everybody, I would say Mediterranean diet, which has good animal protein, good fats like olive oils, things like that, avocado, fish, good vegetables, and some fruit. Now, doing that with knowing your food sensitivities is my most recommended diet. But if you're like, hey, I want to really go after inflammation aggressively, the most aggressive diets that go after inflammation is animal-based and carnivore and autoimmune paleo. So if you have autoimmune, I'm immediately saying go autoimmune paleo. If you just want to do an aggressive anti-inflammatory, I say go animal-based or carnivore. If you have blood sugar dysregulation, there is not a better diet than keto. If you are hypoglycemic or hyperglycemic, ketogenic diet. I talk about that a ton in the blood sugar video. And then just to reiterate, Array 10 for food sensitivities from Cyrex. All right, last but not least, supplements. Okay, so we got to take care of our barriers. And we have to take care of our barriers with antioxidants, right? And what antioxidants go down as we age? Glutathione, nitric oxide, stomach acid. And then we have to support the thymus gland and address NF-kappa B amplification. So barriers, thymus gland, that will do tolerance, and then NF-kappa B. All right, number one, this is, when I talk about all the supplements, if you hear nothing else, this is what you need to know. Glutathione, so trisomal glutathione from Apex and Fullscript is my favorite. Enterovite for short chain fatty acids, okay? Absolutely essential. You need that for your gut microbiome, for tolerance. Short chain fatty acids is my number one supplement for tolerance. My number one for barriers is going to be glutathione, right? So trisomal glutathione, Enterovite from Apex. Now, butyrate, Enterovite tastes terrible. Every butyrate is going to taste terrible. So what I would say is for your child, I found one that's liquid. It's by Pure Encapsulation. It's called Sun Butyrate TG. Has rosemary oil. That's a better butyrate for kids to take liquids. After that, so we got short chain fatty acids and glutathione. Then we need vitamin A and D and K, right? We need vitamin D, but we need A and K to absorb it. So that is going to be Da Vinci Labs ADK. That A and D also do your barriers with glutathione. Your top ones for barriers are glutathione, A and D. All right, and now this is crucial. Fish oil. Okay. Now, I asked, does NSAIDs help you? Do you have period cramps? Those are some clinical pearls. There is a essential and metabolic fatty acid analysis in my Rupa link to see how your prostaglandins are. But let me just go off of what I find clinically. Okay, there's 3 of them that I use. So if you have a lot of brain inflammation or you're a child and you need neurological development, I use cod liver oil. Cod liver oil is high in DHA and has a lesser amount of EPA. Okay. Actually, there's 4 fish oils I'll talk about. So that's number 1. If you're looking for neurological stuff, cod liver oil. If you don't want to take K and you want the A and D, it's cod liver oil because it's high in A and D. So that can be like, get 2 of them. You can get your vitamin D, you can get your fish oil. Now, DHA and EPA are actually the #1 nutrients to promote resolution. They promote something called resolvins. Okay, so we absolutely need this for resolving from infections, right? That chronic cough, chronic inflammation. Okay, so that's #1. If you are more cardiovascular health, then I usually use fish oil 800. Both of those are from Vital Nutrients in Fullscript. That's higher in EPA. EPA more cardiovascular, DHA more neurological. Okay, now here's some other ones. These are the other 2 that have omegas 3, 6, and 9. So if you have a massive prostaglandin imbalance, these are the ones that I will do. So #1, optimal EFAs from Biotics. #2, complete omega essentials from Natura. All of this is in Fullscript, and that has sea buckthorn in it, which is omega 7. Now, if you struggle with HPA axis and adrenal issues, omega 7 is awesome. So that's when I go more to the complete essential omegas. So if you have like a lot of resolving resolution issues, and you are having a lot of HPA axis cortisol dysregulation, that's the fish oil I use. If you are just like, hey, I just want 3, 6, and 9s, and it's for period cramps, stuff like that, you can use that one, but you can also just use the optimal EFAs. I've used that for years with great results. If you want the cardiovascular, that's the fish oil 800, high in EPA. If you want the neurological, you have like the brain fog and things like that, then I think more cod liver oil 1025 from Vital Nutrients. Okay, so I'm going to keep recapping. Glutathione, short chain fatty acids, vitamin D, and fish oil. And now the next one is to address NF-kappa B. The best 2 things to do, turmeric and resveratrol. Cleanse Plus, which will also take care of most exogenous triggers, infections, heavy metals, chemicals, and it will help some endogenous like liver toxicity. That is going to be my #1. So if I had to choose, trisomal glutathione, Enterovite, 80K, complete omega essentials, and Cleanse Plus. Those are the 5. Write those down. That's it. Now, if you do better with liquids, then, or for children who don't do good with mixing pills into smoothies and stuff, Tumero and Resvera from Apex are liquids. Those are great as well. So if you just want a turmeric or you just want a resveratrol, go with the liquids. That's in Fullscript. Okay, that is absolutely that is non-negotiable. Those have to be in place. Now we're going to go into some of the other ones. So if you have low stomach acid, which as we age, they say 35 and over, you start getting low stomach acid. Well, if you have low stomach acid, what's one of the main symptoms? You wake up stiff, right? I always say that's either lymph or it's low stomach acid. A lot of times both. So I like using digestive enzymes. I know some people don't like using digestive enzymes. I have never found that it changes the negative feedback loop. I used to think it did. And so I'd be like, hey, I don't give glutathione. I don't give vitamin D. I don't give enzymes. And then I started noticing that people would strengthen a muscle test to them, and I would use hand modes and they would still need enzymes. Now, as we're older, for sure, like if you're over the age of 35, especially over the age of 50, you need to be taking enzymes. If you are in your 30s and your 20s, I take enzymes throughout the week. I don't do every meal. I'll probably do maybe a meal a day or every other day, something like that. I use Gastro Digest from Vervita. If you want something that's stronger in stomach acid or just HCl, my next one I use is Enzymix Pro from Apex, which is in Fullscript, but my #1 is Gastro. For kids, in Fullscript is Vitalzyme Chewables. All right, nitric oxide, right? So glutathione lowers, hydrochloric acid lowers, nitric oxide lowers. And nitric oxide is the antioxidant for your blood vessels. Regenerzyme Heart. It has so much of what helps the mitochondria. And this is why Versandol said anyone over the age of 55 needs to be on 5 Regen Heart a day. And I agree with him. Regen Heart over 55 for a multivitamin and to support the heart mitochondria, absolutely essential. But Regenerzyme Heart is good for athletes, right? It's good for really anybody. So Regenerzyme Heart. That will do your mitochondria as well as your nitric oxide. And what really helps nitric oxide in there is hawthorn berries. Now, if you want to do the Supreme Nutrition route, you're like, hey, I want to just even do more than Regen Heart for my nitric oxide. They have Hawthorne Supreme, which is a fantastic supplement for nitric oxide. And if you really are like, hey, cardiovascular is my thing, I need more nitric oxide, then I do Regen Heart, Hawthorne, and Danshen. Okay. Remember, these are just for some people who need the extra support. I already covered the main stuff for inflammation. And then thymus gland for sure. Now, from a methylation standpoint, the vitamin D receptor is what strengthens your thymus gland. So does vitamin C, but vitamin D is and vitamin A. A and D is crucial. So ADK, I already mentioned that. That will strengthen thymus. However, there's a lot of times where people will need more than that, and that's where I'll use Thymus Supreme. Thymus Supreme can be taken long-term to build that thymus. Now, your thymus gland will actually shrink in real time off of stress. Too much cortisol shrinkens your thymus gland, which then promotes inflammation and also autoimmune issues. That's the autoimmune connection, because your thymus gland is what looks at all your cells and it says, hey, that's not a good cell. We need to kill that cell, and it uses cortisol to do so. So if you have too high cortisol shutting down your thymus gland, and then you go to low cortisol, now you can't do what the thymus is trying to do for your immune system. So that's the autoimmune connection. So that's the long-term support is ADK and Thymus Supreme. In the short term, if you need like immune system help right now, get my thymus really right now, Immune Armor, right? So that's still for viruses, bacteria, acute infections, Immune Armor. All right. So that is in a nutshell, those have to be in place. And what I said was glutathione, short chain fatty acids, vitamin A, D, and K, especially AD, fish oil, turmeric and resveratrol, which is in Cleanse Plus, or you can do the liquids. That is absolutely number one. The hydrochloric acid, the nitric oxide, and the thymus gland are if you want to take it to the next level. And that seems like you. Okay, activation. Got to find the reoccurring source. So take the symptom quiz. But with the immunoglobulins, the IgG and the IgM, what helps those are your sensitivities, right, to foods and infections, is turmeric and resveratrol again, and glutathione and fish oil. So it's the same stuff is going to help that. Now, one thing is you need adequate protein to build proper immunoglobulins. So 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day, okay, of animal protein. If your immunoglobulins are low. But a lot of times when we're talking with inflammation, they're going to be high because they're being activated. IgE, right? That is your allergies. I would say quercetin and vitamin C. So Camu Supreme and Orthomune from Orthomolecular, which is in Fullscript, have been my 2 favorites. Now, if you're a person who's like, hey, I've tried C, I've tried quercetin, it didn't touch it. This is where I go with Petunia Supreme and Astragalus Supreme. So if you're like an asthma, chronic seasonal allergies constantly, itchy, eyes, watery eyes, you can do Orthomune, Camu, but then add in Petunia and Astragalus. Okay, amplification of NF-kappa B, I already mentioned above, turmeric resveratrol, which is like Cleanse Plus. And then last but not least, resolution, which I've already covered. Resolvins, right? So fish oil number 1, vitamin D number 2, antioxidants number 3. So we have the vitamin D, we have the fish oil we talked about, and the omegas, the 3, 6, 7, and 9s. And then the antioxidants, which is found in Cleanse Plus, is a massive antioxidant source. And the main one, trisomal glutathione. Okay? Now, this is the last 2 minutes of the video. If you need for resolution more support than that, if you're like, hey, I'm doing all that, I still getting lingering coughs, my skin issues aren't healing, here's where you take it next. Cortisol dysregulation, so watch the adrenal fatigue video. And then berberine, which is golden thread, which if you have high blood sugar, you should be on it already. Berberine actually clears debris fields as well. So that's going to be one you add on if you still struggle with resolution. Again, the fish oil should be number 1. The vitamin D and antioxidants you should be golden with that. But here's if you struggle, berberine, which golden thread. Cleanse Plus, because it has resveratrol. Resveratrol also clears debris fields. So you would already be on that, either Resveratrol or Cleanse Plus. And then last but not least, if you're still doing that and you still have resolution issues, lymphatic system. So you should be if you have lymph issues, dry brushing, hydration, rebounding on a trampoline, movement, right? You need all of that. But Cleanse Plus has Spanish black radish in there. It has oregano, which helps push the lymph system and drain the lymph. It also has liver support where most of the lymph is made. So Cleanse Plus, you should already be on, will take care of the lymph. If you're like, hey, I still struggle, that's when you add Mangista Supreme. So Cleanse Plus and Mangista Supreme together is my favorite lymph support. All right, folks, that is the deep dive on inflammation. I hope it landed properly for you. As I said, this video applies to everybody, along with blood sugar and the releasing emotional trauma video. So thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you all in the trenches.